We can go ahead and get started with introductions, Kate.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, Carmen. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Kate McCleary. I'm the Associate Director in the School of Education's Global Engagement Office, which is an office that was opened 3 years ago by the School of Education to support and do work with international students, with study abroad, with international research, with internationalizing the coursework and programs that we're offering, as well as just bringing attention to the importance of international and global education within the school. So I'm very happy to be here today. I'm very happy to be introducing Ms. Emily Hall and Dr. Annie Smiley in a moment to speak with all of you today. I'm going to go over some housekeeping things just so that everyone is kind of knowledgeable and aware of kind of what's happening. So I want to give a huge thanks to Carmen Pitts, who's the Assistant Director of IRIS and who has put together a kind of a seamless presentation for today. And she's also here to assist all of us, to assist you. And so please, if you're having any technology issues or you need any assistance, please feel free to reach out to her via chat. She's going to be monitoring the chat the whole time. And as we get started today, think about the questions that you have for the presenters. We do have a list of questions that were submitted with your registration, so we will certainly be attentive to those. But think about the questions that you have and you want to ask and bring into the conversation today. The Q&A, that you can put those in Q&A. You can see the chat is open as well, but please feel free to put your questions in the Q&A. This session is being recorded, so please just be aware of that. Only those speaking will be shown on screen, and right now, due to the amazing number of participants, everyone is muted. So you are on mute, you will not be shown. The presenters will be the ones who are part of the recording. You will get resources from this event via email tomorrow from Carmen, and so you'll be able to access the link to the talk as well as access handouts that will be discussed as part of this. As we seek to get started this afternoon, we wish to take a moment to recognize the land that the University of Wisconsin-Madison occupies. This university occupies ancestral Ho-Chunk land, a place their nation called Daejeop since time immemorial. In an 1832 treaty, the Ho-Chunk were forced to cede this territory. Decades of ethnic cleansing followed when both the federal and state government repeatedly, but unsuccessfully, sought to forcibly remove the Ho-Chunk from Wisconsin. This history of colonization informs our shared future of collaboration and innovation. Today, the University of Wisconsin-Madison respects the inherent sovereignty of the Ho-Chunk Nation, along with the 11 other First Nations of Wisconsin. And I encourage you, if you are not familiar with the First Nations of Wisconsin, wisconsinfirstnations.org is a wonderful website to visit to see and learn about the First Nations in the state. So IRIS and the Global Engagement Office are co-sponsors along with the International Studies majors, Middle East Studies Program, Center for South Asia, African Studies Program, the Global Higher Education Program, and the Institute for Regional and International Studies. The IRIS National Resource Center supports and enhances international and global awareness and inspires informed thinking about the complexities of our world. The IRIS NRC provides resources and expertise to K-12 teachers and students, post-secondary educators, and students and the community at large. So with those introductions, I am so delighted to be able to get to introduce Ms. Emily Hall and Dr. Annie Smiley. I had the true pleasure to work with Emily when she was an undergraduate at Washington College, and I look forward to hearing what she has been up to the last 5 years and getting to hear tonight from Dr. Smiley, who just took on a new position, so we'll be excited to hear how that's going as well. Emily Hall is a professional in the international education field with specializations in teacher training, multiple intelligence-based instruction, mindfulness education, and pedagogical anthropology. As an educator, she has taught in Nepal, Tanzania, and the United States. For the past 5 years, she has worked in the field of global teacher exchange programs and currently works at the Center for Intercultural Education and Development, or CIED, at Georgetown University as a community engagement coordinator for the US Department of State funded English language program. She holds a BA from Washington College in Human Development and Elementary Education and an MA in International Education from the George Washington University. Dr. Annie Smiley, or Ann Smiley, currently serves as IRC's Deputy Project Director of Research for the LEGO Foundation funded Play Matters Project, which is an education program for refugee children in Ethiopia, Tanzania, and Uganda. She has 15 years of experience designing, implementing, and evaluating education programs globally, with a focus on education in emergencies. Previously, she served as Associate Director of Research and Evaluation with FHI 360's Global Education, Employment, and Engagement Unit, leading a team of monitoring, evaluation, and research specialists in support of a broad portfolio of development programs around the world. She was formerly co-lead of the Education Equity Research Initiative and has been principal investigator on multiple large mixed methods research studies that are building evidence around education and emergencies and education equity. She holds a BA in anthropology from the University of California at Berkeley, an MA in education from the University of California at Davis, and an EDD in international development from Teachers College, Columbia University. So with that, I am so pleased to welcome our two guests. I want to do like jazz hands because in lieu of clapping for you both for being here today. And I will invite you to get started. Thank you both so much for being here. Emily, I'll pass the Zoom floor to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Kate. It's wonderful to see you again and connect, and welcome everyone for joining us today. We're grateful that you're here. And before I speak about my trajectory and some tips and strategies for finding your way in the international education field, I invite you to just take a moment to think about your why. Why are you here today? What is your why and interest in the international education field? And what is it that you're seeking to learn from today's session? So with that reflection, we'll be able to connect and share and hopefully inspire all of you to find your way in this robust and diverse field that is international education. So as Kate mentioned, I currently work at Georgetown University's Center for Intercultural Education and Development. And my job works with the English Language Fellow and Specialist programs, which are teacher exchange programs for mid-career level teachers in the teaching English as a second language field. And I've been in my current position for almost 2.5 years now. And my job involves moderating an online community of practice where teachers share all of the impact that they're doing in the field. I also, in lieu of COVID-19, have been organizing and coordinating online events, including a diversity, equity, and inclusion series, a careers in TESOL field series, and a variety of other topics to keep our grantees connected, sharing ideas, and just continuing to grow and further their knowledge, skills, and impact. So how did I get to where I am today? How did I find my passion and my interest in supporting teachers? And what are some of the other offshoots of the international education field? Well, together we will explore these things. So reflecting back on my time as an undergraduate, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I had so many ideas. I wanted to study education. I wanted to study anthropology. I wanted to study music. I wanted to study theater. And I just loved learning so much that I wasn't sure what to do. So by utilizing resources. So here's my tip number one: utilize your resources on your campus. I was able to really reflect on, okay, what are the top skills and what are the things that I want to do on a daily basis. And education kept coming through as the catch all for all of these interests. Education is a way of sharing, it's a way of connecting, it's a way of continually learning and growing. And so I realized, okay, education is my umbrella. And then I took an anthropology course, which really inspired me and opened my mind to the world. And I became really fascinated with culture and how culture impacts education, culture impacts teachers' perspectives, culture impacts curriculum. And so, with that, I found a mirror of what I wanted to dive deeper into. So I narrowed it down. But for you, in your undergraduate or graduate trajectory right now, I invite you to find your advocates, find professors who inspire you, and take more of their classes. Build a relationship with these professors because they're going to be the ones writing your recommendation letters. They're the ones who are going to help you find and refine your interests. So find your advocates, and they might not be professors. Kate McCleary became one of my advocates in the Global Education Office and really helped me reflect and find my way. And in a similar note, your professors in your university really wants you to succeed, and everyone wants you to find your way. And there are a number of offices and staff members who have jobs specifically there to help you grow and flourish. So, one space that really helped me was the Writing Center. I ended up working there, developing my writing skills. So, in the international education field, learning how to write is a very, very important thing, from writing resumes to across the board, whether you're in exchange programs, whether you're in development projects, writing is key. So, finding ways to take writing intensive courses and explore writing in different modalities, it will really help you in finding your way. The Career Center was also very helpful. I went there, I talked to the Career Center director about possible tracks and internship opportunities and what types of experiences I needed to have a global educator experience. And through those conversations, I decided, okay, my goal right now is to become a Fulbright English teaching assistant. So, junior year, that was my goal. I wanted to do Fulbright. And I had a team of supporters through my professors, through Kate McCleary in the Global Education Office, through the Writing Center staff who supervised me and helped me learn how to train other peer mentors in writing skills. And they were all there to say, yes, choose Emily, because we had built those relationships. So the journey continued, and my advocates supported me in my application because of the recommendation letters that they wrote. I was really grateful to have the opportunity to do Fulbright in Nepal. And prior to that, I also found opportunities at my university to get international experience and conduct research without having to pay out of my own pocket. And that also helped me be a more competitive applicant for Fulbright. So I encourage all of you to find what academic honor societies or centers at your university have grants for students to conduct research. I was grateful at Washington College to receive 2 grants through the Cater Society of Junior Fellows to conduct independent research projects as an undergraduate in Tanzania. And that experience opened my eyes to the world at the age of 19. And I am so grateful for that because through those experiences, I was able to be there. And there is nothing more powerful than being there, getting to work with teachers and students and see firsthand through your lens what is happening in the world of education abroad. So, see what opportunities there are on your campus to apply for grants to travel. Um, they want to give you these opportunities. They want students like you to go out and make a difference and come back and share what you've learned. The intercultural exchange piece, the reflection piece of finding your way is invaluable. So, I wonder what resources you'll find on your campus. Um, and grants also helped me in my graduate program. So when I joined the international education program at the George Washington University, I knew I wanted to go to Nepal to conduct my thesis, but I didn't have funds. So I remember walking into my advisor's office, and he said, "I'm not sure if there are any grants available, but just check your emails from the university. Why don't you join the listserv for the international studies program? Why don't you join the listserv for the regional interests that you have?" And for me, that was Asia. So I joined. And 2 weeks later, an email came that the Seeger Center for Asian Studies had grants available for any graduate students looking to do a thesis abroad. So I applied, and gratefully, that opportunity worked out. So talk to your professors, see what listservs you can join in areas that may be tangential to your research interests. Think big, read the emails, and see what opportunities might come to you. Academic honor societies are also a great resource. I was a member of Pi Lambda Theta, which is a education honor society, and I ended up getting a scholarship for grad school through them. So a lot of academic honor societies can help you get funding for grad school or funding for independent research projects while abroad. And those types of things give you something to talk about in interviews. They give you so much to show your work, to build a portfolio, and to really have a unique narrative. It's also a great idea to build your resume as an undergraduate if possible. So, some ideas might be teaching experiences if you're interested in working or teaching abroad. So, finding local schools, finding ways to tutor in areas of your interest, any teaching experience or background that you have will also help your application stand out, because many applications do seek some teaching background, depending on the context, of course. And with that, I just want to say keep your why close by. Once you find your why, for me, it's connecting with teachers and helping teachers connect to each other and sharing resources and strategies so students can have the opportunity to be creative beings and actualize themselves. But what's your why? what subjects are your why and what are the overlaps? And once you find that and you find the resources, you can map out steps that best lead you to making the largest impact you possibly can. So that's all from me.
Thanks so much, Emily, for those thoughts. It's really, really appreciated. I appreciate the question of the why, right? So that's for us in everything that we do. Why are we doing this? Why are we choosing to do this? Yeah, thank you for that. Dr. Smiley, so we will do Q&A at the end. So we will give Dr. Smiley a chance to kind of share her thoughts. And again, feel free to start sharing questions.
Thank you, Kate, and thank you, Emily. That was such a wonderful overview, and I so much resonated with my own experience. And I just was taking notes. You know, I also have a background in anthropology. One of my greatest advocates was Leslie Bartlett, who's in the Zoom room right now. Learning how to write has been completely instrumental in my career. So everyone remember that. Writing skills are key. I had a Fulbright as well, so we have a similar background there. And then also research grants. I mean, everything you said just really resonated. So I feel lucky to go after you. So I'll talk to you all a little bit about my own path from undergraduate, and I'll do it a little bit chronologically and then lead up to what I'm working on now and talk a bit about, I think, some of the key things that everyone should think about if they really want to pursue a career, particularly in the side of international education that I'm in, which is I would describe as international educational development and the intersection with international humanitarian issues. So I got started in this field as an undergrad. I was at UC Berkeley studying anthropology, but I had a focus on archaeology, so a bit different. And I decided to go to Egypt for my study abroad year and was able to get some funding from a grant to do that year abroad in Egypt. And while I was there, I got a job, a volunteer job teaching English in a refugee education program in Cairo. And that was really the biggest life-changing experience, I would say, of my life, was having that, you know, initial overseas formative education experience. That volunteer teaching position it led me to change the focus of my major in anthropology to cultural anthropology. And I ended up going forward with a cultural anthropology degree. I ended up getting a grant to go, a research grant, as Emily was saying, from UC Berkeley to go back to Egypt after that study abroad year and do ethnographic research for my honors thesis as an undergrad. And I rarely get a chance to meet undergrads who have had like that kind of in-depth research experience. And I think it has really made a big difference in my own career. So if you can get those kinds of early research on the ground experiences, as Emily was saying, I think it's incredibly formative. So I spent 2 months doing ethnographic research in people's homes. These were Sudanese refugees. And then based on those two experiences in Egypt, as soon as I graduated from undergrad, I was hired to go back and be the director of education, of adult education in the same school that I had been volunteering in. So it was my first professional experience as well, was linked to that initial overseas study abroad experience. So working in that role in Egypt, it was a humanitarian type of position. These were refugees coming from all over the Horn of Africa, but primarily from Sudan, really gave me an understanding of the challenges facing, you know, broad swaths of the population all over the world who really don't have access to quality education or education at all. And this was, you know, a really sort of huge realization for me that, you know, so many kids don't have access, that education is a human right, but it's not actually, you know, available to everybody who needs it. And then the quality of education in many parts of the world is really, really bad, and kids aren't learning. And so my work in Egypt led me to consider a master's degree in education. So I spent 2 years in Egypt. I ended up getting married, and my husband is from Sudan, and we moved back to the US together, and I did a master's in education policy at UC Davis. So I went back to California, which is where I'm from, and then did a master's thesis looking at one of the most interesting contexts when it comes to sort of education in crisis and education in emergencies at that time, which was education in Rwanda and the post-conflict reconstruction that was going on in Rwanda following the genocide, specifically related to education. So that's where I focused my master's research, and then immediately was so sort of excited about my academic and research career, looking at international educational development and humanitarian issues, that I applied to do my doctoral degree at Teachers College Columbia, which is where I met Leslie, best decision of my life, and spent 5 years in New York. Well, not the entire 5 years in New York, spent 5 years as a student at Columbia, at Teachers College. And during that time, just had some amazing experiences. And so I'll talk more about it in a minute, but amazing opportunities when you're in New York, or Washington, D.C. is similar, but these cities that are really international cities where you have internship opportunities, so many of them. I interned with IRC, I interned with UNICEF, consultancy opportunities. I was able to get funding to go and do research in South Sudan, which was a big interest of mine at the time. I was able to take a course that had a whole component that was funded to go to Southern Africa and do policy implementation research, looking at education policies in Southern Africa. So I ended up going to Lesotho, the very small country inside of South Africa, and did policy implementation research there. That was all during my coursework years. And when it was time for me to do my dissertation research, I was planning to do, ethnographic qualitative research, mixed methods, but with a focus on ethnographic research. And I ended up getting a Fulbright to go back to Lesotho to do a year of really intense ethnographic research, and I said some quantitative elements as well, in a village and across Lesotho, looking at basically how orphans and vulnerable children were managing to succeed in secondary school. And this was in the midst of the AIDS pandemic, and with Lesotho being sort of the third highest rate of HIV/AIDS in the world. So really, a different kind of a crisis, but nevertheless a really interesting and important and timely topic. So I spent that year in Lesotho, and then when I got back to the US, my husband and I decided to relocate to Washington, D.C. And that's where I still am. I'm in my basement right now in Maryland, just outside of DC, wishing that I was in Uganda, which is where I'm going to be relocating in a very short while. But in any case, been in the Washington, D.C. area for the last 11 years, I think. And I was able to get a job with the Academy for Educational Development, which was an organization that was doing mostly U.S. government funded international education development work all over the world. And I ended up on a research team at AED, and immediately was able to do research on really the impact of basically educational. I started looking at education technology interventions in Rwanda. Actually, was where I first started my research at AED. And shortly after that, AED was acquired by FHI, Family Health International, and became FHI 360. And so I ended up being in that institution for 10 and a half years. And my career there was really focused on building programs that mostly U.S. government, so USAID, the U.S. Agency for International Development, that are focused on basically helping governments all over the world build and improve their education systems in a whole bunch of different ways. So looking at improving access to education, improving the quality of education, improving education systems and service delivery, but really it's technical assistance provided directly most of the time to governments to help them be able to improve their education systems and the quality of services, and improve learning outcomes ideally. So I spent the last 10 and a half years working on programs, and primarily working on monitoring and evaluation and research to try to understand what's working and what's not working so well when it comes to these kinds of international development assistance type programs, which of course, as I'm sure all of you know, are, they're fraught with challenges and power dynamics, and there's all kinds of issues that come into play when you're talking about international development. And so being in the middle of it has really given me an interesting view of sort of the pros and cons of some of the kinds of development work that we do in education. Over the last 5 years or so, my work has really moved into the area of research on education equity issues. So looking looking not only at issues of gender equity, which is kind of what most people think of when they think about education equity globally, but also looking at issues of disability and socioeconomic status and race and ethnicity in other countries and language spoken and all of the sort of equity issues that are around distribution of education resources globally and in some mostly in developing countries. Most of my research has been in West Africa. I've worked a lot recently in Nigeria, in Ghana, and then very recently I'd also worked in South Sudan. I've worked in Rwanda and Southern Africa as well, and a number of different countries, Malawi as well, and mostly around Africa and a little bit in the Middle East as well. So my background in the last 5 years or so is primarily research and monitoring and evaluation, looking at kind of what works in international educational development and also education in emergencies. So a lot of my work in Nigeria was focused on the conflict affected region in the Northeast, where there's been huge, education crisis with millions of children unable to attend school for years and years and years. So that was my last job. And just around February 1st, I transitioned to my new position, which is with the International Rescue Committee. And with IRC, I am also in a research role. So the LEGO Foundation is a new, not new, but they're a big player in international education these days. And the LEGO Foundation is really just kind of changing the game when it comes to private sector actors that are participating in this space. They are focused on play, as you can imagine, and learning through play and the importance of, sort of play-based pedagogies, not only at the early childhood level, but also looking at primary spaces as well, primary education. So our program is aiming to incorporate learning through play into early childhood development centers and primary schools, basically kids aged 3 to 12 in 3 East African countries in refugee communities, as well as in host communities in those countries. And that's Uganda, Ethiopia, and Tanzania. And I will be based in Uganda, but because of COVID, I haven't been able to travel yet. So hopefully we'll be traveling within the next couple of months. So that's kind of my trajectory, and I'm happy to answer questions about that. But just to talk a little bit about, and I know I'm probably running out of time, so please just ping me if I need to stop. But just to talk a little bit about, how to improve your job applications and how to get into the market. Let me say, I recommend practical courses as much as possible. So courses that build your real skills. So data analysis courses, statistics courses, qualitative data analysis. I'm a researcher, so of course I'm leaning that way, but really practical classes are going to be really important. And when I often am hiring for research associates, et cetera, and we're always looking for those kinds of practical skills. So definitely recommend, all the theory is great. I'm not saying not to take theory classes, but also the practical skills classes to complement those. And then, in addition, writing classes, which Emily also mentioned. So, writing intensive classes, and maybe I remember I had a class at one point where I learned to actually write a proposal. We do a lot of proposal writing in our field. So those kinds of skills are really great too. Language skills, I cannot tell you how useful it is to speak French. Spanish is a close second. Arabic is a close third. There are other languages that are also really, really in demand, depending on where you're working and where, which projects. But we are always looking for French speakers in particular. So that is something to consider. The international experiences, whatever you can get, is really going to be, a huge game changer, I think, when it comes to looking for jobs and showing that you have the experience, that the kinds of experience that we'd be looking for when we're hiring. So if you can do Peace Corps, if you can do, like what I did, I went to Egypt and worked for 2 years after college. that was very similar to a Peace Corps type experience, even though it wasn't. I did it on my own, but that's the kind of thing that, you know, really changes what your resume looks like. And I can't stress enough how useful that is, not only for you personally, because it is a very personally, you know, that is one of the best things I think everyone can do personally, but also professionally. Look for internships, look for consultancies. If you are in, you know, we're in COVID times, and nowadays you don't really have to be anywhere in particular to look for those consultancies and internships. So we're so remote these days that, you know, in the past I would have said, you know, go to New York, go to DC, go to these places where you can find a million of these opportunities, but it doesn't seem to matter right now. You can do them from anywhere. So you know, getting in the door is really the key. Getting networked is key. Really trying to, you know, contact people that are already working in the field, and you can, you know, people like myself and Emily or others. You can try to reach out to people via LinkedIn or however. I can't tell you how many requests I get for informational interviews, and I almost always give them. So I probably shouldn't say that in front of a large group. Might get inundated, but I do enjoy talking to people about their professional trajectories, and I think a lot of other people do too. So don't assume that you can't reach out and talk to people who are already professionals in the field. And the worst that can happen is that they say no, right? So, or they just don't respond at all, which is probably the most likely. So it doesn't hurt to reach out, and then look for those opportunities like Fulbright, like other kinds of, like the FLOSS, that still exists, right? The Foreign Language Area Services grants, you know, there's lots of different kinds of, not only like university-based grants, but also federal grants that you can look for, and other types of grants to do these kinds of international experiences. And then I think my very last piece of advice is to attend international education conferences. And we have a conference that Leslie and I go to every year, called the Comparative and International Education Society Conference. I'm sure others on this call also attend CIES. But I think that those conferences are really incredibly helpful. Just, you don't have to present, you can just, you know, attend, but you can meet people, you can network, you can learn so much about the state of the field by attending a conference. And I think that is one of the best ways to sort of get in and also stay involved and stay up to speed on what the latest thinking is in this field. CIES is one example. There are other conferences as well, and other, I should say, societies, not just the conference, but it's the society itself. So I think those are my key messages. I'm sure I went over time, so sorry, Kate.
No, you're still within your time frame.
Really?
So thank you. Yeah. Thanks,
Amazing.
Fanny. Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
It's because I talk so fast, so sorry about that.
No, so thank you. I mean, I think you both have given us such wonderful food for thought. I think, you know, in thinking about Emily's trajectory and working now in more, when we think of international education in a space that's more focused on higher ed, international education with a culture, kind of a cultural component, cultural exchange, teacher exchange. I think with Annie, with Dr. Smiley, we have a great spectrum on international development, right? So the field of international development, comparative education in those spaces. So as you start to formulate questions, I'm going to start with some that we already have here, but as you start to formulate questions, please feel free. I'm also interested, if you go back to when we said, when you think of the terms international education, you know, there were some really great terms and words put in up at the top. How do those concepts kind of intersect with what you've now heard from Dr. Smiley and from Ms. Hall, right? So how do those words, how do they now connect with what you're thinking about in regards to the field of international education and jobs in the field of international education? Dr. Bartlett is doing a fantastic job of populating lots of web links in the chat as well. So if you haven't taken a look at that, please feel free to do so. There's lots of follow-up there. And the first question I am gonna throw out is just from the chat. Lauren Lauder asked, are organizations mostly looking for those with quantitative over qualitative research skills and experience? How strong does quant need to be if you were trained in qual? So I'm gonna start with that one, and then I will go to actually I'm gonna the quant qual, and then can you speak to other skills that are useful in the field of M&E?
Is this for me? Yes, this is for me, I
Yes.
think.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, I think that we need both quant and qual, and that's just my short version. I don't usually find people that have both. So I think it's pretty normal to kind of specialize in either quant or qual, but we kind of equally need people with skills in both. And I would say if you can do, use Stata or SPSS or whatever and do like crunch numbers big time, and you can also write, that's amazing. And if you can do qualitative research, you can use, and we use Deduce. I don't know if anyone knows Deduce, but it's an online version of NVivo, or, there's Atlas. There's so many qualitative data analysis softwares, but if you know how to use even one of them, you pretty much know how to use all of them. They're very similar. So if you have those skills and you can write, and you have some data like actual, not just the coding of the data, but you have experience analyzing data and writing up the results, especially for qualitative, yeah, I think that's also almost as maybe not quite, like I think the quantitative skills are usually always in demand and the qualitative skills are maybe slightly less, but they're both really, really important and useful. Almost as important as both of those is the ability to write a literature review. And I know that's something that probably all of you are doing regularly as students. And so, we're always writing desk reviews, literature reviews. It's part of almost every activity and project that we do. So I think, those kinds of skills are really important, and we'll often look for interns or, more junior staff to try to do those kinds of activities. So that's a good entry point, is desk reviews and lit reviews. Other skills, again, so for monitoring and evaluation, that was the question, right? M&E skills.
Yeah, and I actually read that really quickly. I'm going to rephrase it. So the skill is actually other than comm skills and M&E skills. That was my fault. Sorry, Stacey. So other than comm skills and M&E skills, what else is useful in the field?
So many things. Yeah, so I mean, if you have a teaching background, that's obviously, it really depends on what kind of a position you want to move into, because there's so much specialization that happens. So if you have like sort of policy skills, those can be very, very useful, understanding and implementing and analyzing policies in education. Pedagogy, when you get into people who have a teaching background, often what they're doing is really working with teachers directly and working on, basically, working on curriculum and teaching and learning materials, and some of the most interesting and really like nitty-gritty important work of actually training teachers and building, teacher guides and that kind of thing. So those kinds of skills are always in demand. And I'm talking about my own experience and space. So, and maybe Emily, you can jump in as well in terms of yours. But there are these kinds of sort of specialized tracks, I guess, once you get into into the field. And then, of course, I think I mentioned earlier, being able to write proposals, design programs. If you're going to write a proposal, you're basically designing either a program or a study or something. So having that big picture ability to write and design something that is convincing to sell it to, for a donor, and then being able to implement it. So basic skills like, being able to do what we call a Gantt chart or an implementation plan, where you actually sort of time out what a program looks like, step by step, week to week, what are the different pieces of it, and then budgeting. So all of these things are really great skills to have. They're not so much skills that you probably get at in classes necessarily at undergrad. They come with job experience. But those are the kinds of things you might want to look for in an entry-level job to get those kinds of skills. Emily, other thoughts?
Yes. So one thing that came to mind while you were sharing, Dr. Smiley, was the context of the job. And I do want to share, if you go on Indeed or if you go on any job platform and you just type in some keywords of what your dream job might be, just taking a look at what the requirements are and the skills that are needed there is a really great place to start, because the field is so diverse. And in my particular position and positions that I've worked in, I've found event management and planning and a lot of practical skills to be really helpful. for example, in our new digital age, how to organize a webinar, how to use technology. Because of COVID, a lot of programs are now turning online. So being up to date on current technologies for connecting people together as we continually move even more into a digital world, that is going to be, I think, something that a lot of people are looking for. Other skills, creating agendas and facilitating meetings, just being really organized with your to-do list, just things that in any job you'd be successful with. But having a portfolio or things that show that you can do these things. So in your classes, these final projects that you get to work on are a great way to build a portfolio that shows you doing the work. Internships and short-term experiences are also great ways to build portfolios that show that you can do this work. So when you ask, do I have this skill? Also ask yourself, what do I have that shows I have this skill? Because talking about something versus having a short report or a writing sample or something that you can share on your LinkedIn profile or somewhere, it will help you stand out.
Thank you both so much for that. And Shelby Tempest from the School of Education's Career Center Services is on this call. So Emily, she's probably cheering right now in what you just said in terms of thinking about the skills that you have and being able to show it. So she's saying yes, absolutely. Thanks, Shelby. Christina, your question is on deck. I'm going to take a question that was submitted previously through the registration, and that's that there's a person who's interested in pursuing a PhD because they really like to do research but want to be in kind of the higher education space, and they're concerned about devoting like all the time to the academy or to academia and to be moving away from the practitioner side. So I don't know, Annie or Emily, in terms of in any of your experiences, do you ever partner with, professors, and how do faculty link to kind of projects that you're doing both in the development field, and then Emily, for you in terms of what you're doing at George Washington?
I think, Annie, this question will be more for you, but I will say that there are programs out there that focus on the partnership between scholarship and being a practitioner. So how can you be a scholar practitioner is really, I think, up to you and how you can utilize the program that you choose. So finding the best fit program for you that allows you to be both or to lean more on the practitioner side, you create your experience. So that's my 2 cents on that.
I think that's a really good answer, Emily. And I was just thinking with this question about Leslie, who's on the line, and myself. And Leslie's on the academic track, and I decided, I knew when I did my doctoral degree that I wanted to go into a practitioner role, even though I had the doctoral degree. And I think it's interesting because she and I actually do quite similar work, and we, she's often engaged in the, similar kinds of work as me, even sometimes on the same programs as me, and I'm just, we're coming at it from different angles, but we're doing really similar kinds of work. And so, yeah, I mean, I work with professors and academics all the time. I'm not going to say that it's perfect. There's definitely a divide between academics and practitioners. And one of the things that I'm doing as a sort of a research person is trying to help bridge that divide. A research person coming from the practitioner side, working with researchers on the academic side. So it's not perfect. There's a lot of work to be done, but I think, like CIES conference is another great way to see everybody together. Of course, sometimes we split off into our different sessions, and you see all the academics in certain sessions and all the practitioners in other sessions, but it's still a great way to bring everybody together, I think, under one umbrella. So I don't think you need to be too worried about it. As long as you kind of make the effort, like Emily was saying, and you kind of build your own reality, I think you can definitely do that. You can make it happen.
Thank you. Dr. Bartlett, I'm not going to call on you. I don't want to put you on the spot. Do you have anything to add to that since this is the practitioner faculty question?
Gosh, not anything better than what Annie just offered. I was thinking back, Annie and I were both on a project together that was funded by UNICEF. And so, sometimes people in university settings are doing some more direct work with organizations. And then on occasion, for example, faculty will build courses around having students work in groups on projects that FHI 360 or IRC want some help with. So for example, doing those desk reviews or designing survey instruments or things like that. And so sometimes you can find those kinds of collaborations too. They're not as frequent as we'd like them to be. And then the third example I thought of was Save the Children had an internship, a fellowship that faculty would sponsor students to be involved with, and then sort of give some feedback from the university side, and they would have a mentor in the Save the Children organization. So there are some partnerships like that that might be worth exploring.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bartlett. I'm going to turn now to Christina's question that we can kind of all see in the chat, but she's asking, what are the conversations right now in the field surrounding race? A lot of international educators are white and from the global north. As a white woman, this is something I'm constantly considering. How is race being discussed? What is the consideration to power dynamics? Thank you, Christina, for that question. That also aligns with a question that was submitted in terms of how to not, this was submitted again online, how to not have the white savior complex in doing this work. So if the two of you would like to speak to that.
Yeah, I can speak to what my office is doing and the initiatives that we have been putting into place to get applicants and participants in our exchange programs that truly represent the United States, and the conversations that we're having around diversity abroad and what it means to be an American abroad. So next week, we're going to have a presentation at TESOL, Teaching English as a Second Language International Conference, called The Experiences of BIPOC Educators and Allies Abroad. And we have a diverse scope of panelists who have been participants in our program who are going to be talking about this and their experiences being asked, well, where are you really from while they're abroad? And we're just trying in our office to create discourse and to create conversations and to help everyone carry this this experience together. So we're exploring, what does allyship mean? And also, what are the narratives that we haven't listened to yet that we need to pay attention to, so that this white savior complex can be broken down and that we can actually have progress as a collective. And we also have diversity, equity, and inclusion meetings on a regular basis, resources on this topic, which have been shared and disseminated among our community. And so we're doing what we can, and we're always looking to do more.
Thank you. I can jump in here. It's such a good question, Christina, and it's a huge problem in our field. And I think, I think in the last year, a lot of organizations have really started to grapple with this more than they had in the past. And I'm thankful for it. I would say that, the various organizations that I've been working for are, taking you know, relatively substantial steps to try to do some of the similar types of things to what Emily mentioned, sort of HR type stuff and internal to the organization types of actions to try to increase diversity and equity and inclusion within the organization. It's a little bit harder within the broader field. It's a big challenge. And I think, you know, there's a role for higher education to play and sort of also recruiting and supporting non-white students to get into this field. I will say that the field has moved in the last 10 or 20 years even towards when we have what I've been doing is a lot of programs or projects that are based in countries. And so let's say we have a large education program in Ghana, for example, or in Nigeria. Most of the leadership for those programs is from the country, and almost all of the staff managing those programs is local. We have a very strong sort of focus and commitment to engaging local actors and local stakeholders, working with only local organizations. Even on the research side, we have a commitment to always having local principal investigators. So there's a big movement toward, at least in sort of the narrow frame of thinking about international development projects, towards really moving the leadership away from northern-based people like myself towards southern-based actors who are in the countries, who know the context, who are experts in the particular context that they're living in and working in. So that is promising, but it is a really challenging issue, and I'm really glad you brought it up, and I think it's something we're really grappling with.
Okay, I'm gonna throw out another question that came in via registration. How is the continued pandemic impacting jobs in our fields? So kind of both the international development field and maybe the higher education, international ed space as well.
Do you want to start again, Emily, or shall I? Go ahead.
Sure. So when the pandemic hit, our entire programming had to pivot to online. So in 2019, we sent our fellows and specialists to over 80 countries around the world. And all of those projects ended up being online, and they continue to be online right now. So in our world, it's been a trial by fire to learn the ins and outs of teaching best practices for engagement online. How do you teach people in corners of the world with limited Wi-Fi? They're joining on their cell phone. And the grantees in our program have been on the front lines of developing processes and strategies, documenting these, sharing them, and really just finding ways to connect virtually. And in the short term, we are hoping to open up and continue with online programming when it is safe to do so. But in the meantime, we're also going to continue our online programs because they've been such a success when it comes to access. And there's also the budgetary components as well. And it also provides more access to teachers who don't have time in their busy schedule to go abroad for 10 months or 3 months, etc. So the digital world, I believe, is increasing access, and we look forward to seeing what the future holds when it's safe to travel again.
Annie, you're on mute.
Of course, sorry. Thank you for that, Emily. And I think some similar things going on in my in international development, although maybe a little bit different. I would say that I don't really think there are fewer jobs right now. I think almost in education is such a crisis right now with COVID. They're just different. The jobs are different, as Emily was saying. And most of the programs that I've been involved with haven't pivoted to online, but instead have pivoted to radio, because we're doing a lot of programming in rural parts of the world where there is no internet access or not regular, consistent internet access. And we're talking about kids, often primary school kids who don't have access. So anyway, a lot of pivot to remote or distance learning, but sometimes that's through radio. But that's required just, huge learning curve in terms of all kinds of organizations like my own, trying to figure out what that looks like and how we monitor and evaluate things remotely, how we do research remotely. To some extent, jobs have been postponed maybe or delayed because of COVID. But I think the biggest change that I can sort of see big picture is I think that we're going to see a lot less travel in international educational development going forward, because we've realized we can do this work remotely most of the time, a lot of the time. So I'm on, just like everyone else, I'm on Zoom meetings all day long, but I'm working with colleagues all over the world. And I start my day at 5 a.m. because my team is in Uganda, but everyone's in their own home and sitting at a computer, and we're all able to very effectively collaborate and work together. So in the past, there's just incredible waste in terms of, so-and-so needs to be at a 1-hour meeting, so let's send them across the world for that. And we've really realized we don't need to do that anymore. So I'm going to take that as a good thing and a silver lining, let's say. I think overall, there's still a lot of jobs, and education, the importance of education has only been elevated by this crisis, in my opinion.
So what platforms or organizations do you recommend that students visit to learn more about job opportunities in the different fields? So there's somebody who's interested in, pursuing a job in Europe or in other English-speaking location post-graduation. What would you say to them in regards to pursuing something in the field of kind of education that would take them outside the US?
I think, well, for me, it depends on what kind of job in education, because I think if you were looking for a job similar to mine, which maybe that's not what you have in mind, but for those kinds of jobs, you can obviously look on the big aggregating sites for jobs, but I like to just, if you know which organizations you're interested in working for, just go and look on their sites. And, a lot of organizations have amazing websites that you can navigate all kinds of great, opportunities. If you're looking more like for an international teaching job, I think there are whole sites that are dedicated to those kinds of jobs as well. Those are some quick and dirty, but Emily, what do you think?
Yeah, so for me, I'm going to put a link in the chat here to my master's program. They have a email newsletter that goes out bi-weekly, and that newsletter always has a specially curated list of jobs in the international education fields. And you can join that newsletter whether you are interested in going to that school, if you've graduated, et cetera, you can still join the listserv. So just email the email at the bottom of the page there, ask to join the listserv, and they have opportunities in DC, and then opportunities across the United States, and then opportunities internationally, and they organize the listserv jobs in that order. And it's a great way to see and explore what types of jobs might be a best fit for you as well.
Yeah, listservs. I completely agree. Get on the right listservs.
Yeah, and I'm oh, Kathy's asking a great question. Will those websites be recorded and sent to us later? Kathy, I will save the conversation so we can add them. Kathy Yin, who is a special project assistant in the Global Engagement Office, has actually just been working on a project to think about more resources that are specific for international students who are interested in kind of the fields within our School of Education. And I don't know, do I have the power to unmute you? I don't think I have the power to unmute you, Kathy, but I'll throw the website that she's been working on, and we can also add them to the resources folder, as Carmen said. So one of the things that Kathy and I talked about, oh, you're unmuted. Kathy, do you want to just say, great. Do you want to just say something about those resources and kind of what you found in thinking about resources for those who aren't from the United States who are doing job searches in this way?
Yeah, thank you for having a spot for me in this meeting. And what I was doing is that I look at all other universities' career websites, and I found that our career websites on School of Education doesn't have much information that's specifically targeted for international students. That is for those who are not US citizens and might go back to their home countries for job seeking. So those are some information we put together about how international students can find jobs in the United States, how to communicate their visa status, and also some professional networking sites back to their home country or home region. So I think that's quite different when it terms to like international education compared to what domestic student might be interested in. Yeah, so we also have some TESOL, like TESOL organizations or language teaching, but other field in education internationally. So hopefully those resources can be helpful for those international students who are attending this meeting. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Kathy. I really appreciate all your work that you've been doing. And I did just put the links of the work that Kathy's done in the chat. I just, thinking of ministries of education, thinking about, again, for those who are in this forum who are looking to return to a home country or another country where we have family or friends, ministries of education are very large areas that outside of academia, there are a number of graduate students from my PhD program who are now working for ministries of education, along with non-governmental organizations such as those that Annie's working with. And then also we were talking about conferences, again, as a way to connect, but just professional associations as well. So looking at the professional association of the area that you're planning to work in, back in, again, your home country or another country that you will be moving or traveling to. And those professional associations can be good links to making connections, both professionally and also personally in terms of reconnecting with people or meeting new folks in your life. Another question, again, if people have questions, feel free to throw them in chat. I have another question here that says, I would love to find a career that allows me to work with students, but I'm not interested in being a public school teacher. What careers involve working with students directly, but without teaching? So I don't know if either of you have thoughts on that.
I mean, the sky's the limit with jobs. There's so many that are out there. There are ways to become a counselor. You could be a career counselor. You could be some type of coach. I think maybe narrowing down the age group of students that you're interested in working with might be a good way to start. And then thinking about, okay, what are the needs of students at this age? If you're interested in more of the higher education world, career coaching, counseling, those are the main two that come to mind. And there are many different types of counseling these days. So perhaps looking into that. And mental health and international education is also a emerging specialization with more and more opportunities. I can speak to my experience in Nepal, that there's stigmas around mental health still in certain parts of the world. And so that's an area where more and more people are working internationally to share the importance of mental health and overall well-being. So just some food for thought.
Thanks so much, Emily. Annie, did you have any thoughts on that one? Or no? Okay.
I think that was a great answer.
Okay.
Thank you,
yeah.
Emily.
I was just also say that kind of so recruiters, there's recruiters now that are working in high schools to work with students to help help them find universities and colleges outside of their home countries. That's an area in the field of international education. So enrollment, kind of admissions and enrollment management is a field in international education where you might not necessarily, you're not teaching, but you would get to work with students in thinking about helping them become, matched with, the university or the college that they're looking to go to. So that's an area. I'm going to take one last question. Natalie do you have any recommendations for balancing job searches with being a student? She's graduating at the end of the semester and struggling to finding a job for post-graduation and actually finishing my degree. So we will kind of go out with this question. This will be the last question of the day, and then I will wrap us up. But any quick thoughts on that, Emily or Annie? Thanks, Natalie. Good luck.
I don't know that I think it's hard. I think it just, to the extent possible, I know it's probably too late now, but planning ahead so that your load isn't too heavy in the last semester, so that you have a little bit of time to focus on that job search. And I don't know that I have other advice beyond that in terms of balancing it. I don't know, Emily, what do you think?
I mean, I'm a lady of routines. So if you want to choose a day of the week that's job application day, get in the hang of it. Once you have a couple applications out in similar fields, depending on the types of jobs that you're applying for, you might be able to have, a resume or cover letter that can easily be adapted for those types of jobs. So you're not starting from scratch every time. So perhaps your career center is a wonderful place to touch base for free suggestions and guidance on how best to utilize your time and work smart in your application process.
So I want to thank you all, and I apologize to Christina. You asked another great question. We don't have time to answer it today, but I'm not sure if you're in international studies or the School of Education or elsewhere, but Carmen did put a link in with Molly Donovan's information. She's an IS advisor, so you can contact Molly if you're an international relations student. I've thrown my information if you're interested. Shelby Tempest is also in the Career Center in the School of Education. So if you have questions directly for the people in the School of Education, please feel free to reach out to us. And I just want to thank Dr. Smiley and Ms. Hall so very much for your time today, for sharing of your experiences, for outlining pathways of how to get into the field and for what you can be doing in the process. And then for getting us really deeply thinking about some of the issues that are at play right now in this field. So I want to thank all of you for attending. There is going to be another international boot camp that is going to be focused on business. So keep an eye out for that if that's of interest to you. And Iris and Carmen will be sending more information out about that. But I wish you all a wonderful evening. It's so wonderful to see you. And thank you so much for your talks tonight, Dr. Smiley and Ms. Hall. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
Bye.